This is a program that obviously I've been looking forward to in the year since I invited these three folks to be here. I gave them plenty of notice, about a year's notice on this, and we finally made it happen. Obviously, this particular program means a lot to me personally. I was a full-time member of this family for 19 years, and they still give me a passcode to the building. And so that was 12 years ago when I retired. So for 31 years, I've been a very proud and happy member of this WTAW family. But these folks that are here, I'm a newbie, even with 31 years compared to these folks. Mary Mike Hatcher started there when she was 4 years old, and now Mary Mike Hatcher has been coming to work at WTAW every day for 48 consecutive years. Yes, I told you, 4 years old, yeah.
And I might stay until I find a better gig, which I don't think I'm going to find.
And
I think this is the gig. This is it.
Mary Mike has one terrible flaw, and that is when somebody asks her to volunteer, she cannot say no. She has not learned that yet. I could go over the list, but that would take an hour of the things that she does and that she still does. She was former president of MSC Opus, lifetime member of the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo, Texas Association of Broadcasters. In 2017, she was inducted into the Texas Radio Hall of Fame. Her volunteer work, Junior League, St. Anthony's Catholic Church, Leadership Texas, the Women's Club, Houston 100 Club, MSC Opus Guild member, yada, 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 yada. And it says here that she also still has hobbies, if you can believe that.
Work.
Yeah, work. But Mary Mike Hatcher, everyone. Ben Downs. Ben, again, started when he was about 8. No, actually, he first came to WTAW as a student at Texas A&M in 1972. Soon after he came to work, he caught the eye of a young Texas A&M student who would bring him McDonald's every day to work, and that certainly got his attention. And
did she work at McDonald's?
No.
Okay.
No. She was working at me, but the way to a man's heart is indeed through a quarter
Big
pounder
Mac.
with cheese. So, yeah.
Yes. 48 years later, he and Lily are members of this WTAW family, and the Bryan Broadcasting and WTAW general manager is Ben Downs, who has built this conglomerate called Bryan Broadcasting into, I think they lose count every day, but they believe it's 11 radio stations right now. It started out as 2. But Ben wrote 11 because I think he got tired of counting and just estimated. But there's a lot of, and there's a magazine division also with it, and it just goes on and on. 70 employees now of WTAW. Ben also a member of the Texas Radio Hall of Fame in 2019 and the National Association of Broadcasters legendary manager. That's Ben Downs. And he volunteers at everything also.
And Santa Claus.
Oh, oh, you gave it away.
That is my favorite thing. And anytime I'm giving a speech, is to see a group of people and say, how many of you have lived here for 40 years? And and that's amazing. Well, if you were any of the Christmas parades, when you were jumping up and down and wetting your pants, that was me on that float that you were waving at.
But wait.
Yes.
The ultimate answer when the kid asks, are you the real Santa?
Oh, yeah. When the kid, there's always a Cub Scout. And they always say, you're not the real Santa, are you? And I said, well, maybe not, but can you afford to take that chance? Mom, Santa's a smart ass.
I had a feeling I wouldn't get past the introductions before they started the program. So you've already heard Scott talk. Scott DeLucia first got a paycheck from WTAW some 56 years ago when he was at A&M Consolidated as a junior at A&M Consolidated, calling basketball games, I think, as our covering basketball games for WTAW and the Eagle. He became the voice of the A&M Consolidated Tigers. But that was 56 years ago, in 1968. So yeah, you can do the math and know how old Scott is. But both Scott and Ben have wandered off in the time since they first came to WTAW, but they both found their way back. Scott went into television at KCEN in Temple and Waco. That's where I met him back in 1978, I believe. And at an old Southwest Conference football press tour, we were flying on little planes together. And Scott became the news director at KBTX, and then he went off to Beaumont, to East Texas, and he finally found his way back in 1984, where he has been the morning show host of what is now called, and has for a long time been called, the Infomaniacs, and he's still doing that from 6 to 9 every morning today. And that's where I got to start working full-time with Scott when I came on board in 1993. And we worked together for 19 years. So those are our panelists, and like I say, what I want to do with this today, Ben's going to start this off, but what I want to do today is not go back 102 years, because when we present a historical program like this, I like to see audience members nod their head when somebody says something, because it's like, oh, I remember that, and they can relate more to that. So we're only going to go to the last 50 years or so. This is times and things that these people know about and that they experienced and that they created. Before Ben starts, though, I would like, we have several staff members of WTAW, and the thing about WTAW is nobody leaves. If you want a job at WTAW, it's kind of like getting a ticket, a lifetime ticket to a Packers game. You cannot, right, it's, people just do not leave. I think since I left 12 years ago, I think one other person has left since then. They don't leave because it is such a magnificent place to work, and every one of them will tell you that. And we have several employees here that have come here. Would you all stand if you're employed at Bryan Broadcasting? There they are. So good. We sold a lot of extra lunches, Lewis. That's good.
I think they're all lifers, too.
That's good.
Yeah.
And another gentleman who worked at WTAW and KORA, and he's worked every place, as a matter of fact, and he's still working. He's over at the big school now. Jay Sokol. Jay, raise your hand. All right, I'm going to start this off. Ben, go ahead.
I just want to sort of set the scene. This is the earliest picture that I know of a radio station in Texas. We believe that it's 1919, and we believe it was even before we had the call letters WTAW. We were either, at this time, we were either 5XB or 5YA. We were an experimental station. We were over in Bolton Hall. Our first license that we have that was application that was in 1922 is signed by Dr. F.C. Bolton, who was the sponsor of the radio club. The guy right there is the guy who stole the parts to get WTAW on the air, I'm sure, William A. Tolson. He was a senior at the time. You could, if the screen was a little bigger, you could see that he has his senior boots on. Right now we're at 1620 on the dial, and many of you know us when we were on 1150 for a long time. And we've been on a lot of frequencies in our time. We started when we were first licensed on 820, moved to 1180, 1170, 1110, 831. And these others that you see, we were on 1150 probably for longer than anything we've been on, probably about 40 or 50 years. And then we're on 1620 that you probably recognize as being on right now. One of the things that I wanted to talk to you about as I kind of set the stage here, WTAW, licensed by the FCC, all of the, and this is important to this crowd and no other crowd, this slide would not be in any other slide pack, But the FCC from the time radio began to be licensed by the Department of Commerce, wrote down every darn thing that they did. If you wanted to sign off an hour later, then you would send a note to the FCC and they would grant permission. If you wanted to do a special broadcast, you send a note to the FCC and they would grant permission. In the late 70s, the FCC took everything off and put it on microfiche, and then about 10 years ago, they put them onto PDF files. So every radio station that's got any age to it at all, you can go and look up history cards, and it's awash in information. For example, this one right here, this is what one of the history cards looks like. You can see that we signed on October 7th, 1922, on 360 meters. That was how they measured frequency back in the day. If you can do a Google search for a conversion, and it comes out to be about 830. But you can see in 1923, they gave us permission to move to 1180 on the dial. Some of the things I want you to see. In 1935, the FCC granted WTAW permission to remain silent from the end of May to the start of September. This was when WTAW was owned by Texas A&M University. Can you put it together as to why a Texas A&M University station would want to be off the air from the end of May until the 1st of September? That's right, summer break, and exactly. Here's some other stuff that this is the detail on here as a history buff. When I found these history cards, I was so happy. This is, they asked to have, in 1937, a description of a review to honor the president and broadcast a radio talk by him. So that was one of the reasons we got a special treat. Right here, this is also, if you're interested in radio, and I hope you've got at least a smattering of interest, we shared frequencies back then. And one of the stations we shared frequencies with was WJBO. And whenever they were signing off, because we were considered a college station and not all that important, whenever they would sign off and not broadcast, we would take over their space on whatever frequency it was. And so they agreed to sign off long enough for us to do a telegraphic description of a football game. This one's pretty cool too. It's an extra hour on the air to broadcast from the Agricultural Engineering Ball. Who knew? This one's good too. That's when KTBC decided they were going to try to, kind of flex their muscles, but it's Austin, so what do we care? But so when KTBC wasn't on the air, we took it over, and we did our shows and all that. Once again, that's the era of frequency sharing. This one was a fairly interesting show here that I was excited about. We took an extra hour from 8 until 9 Central Standard Time in 1942 to broadcast a special program in connection with the choir performance by the Texas State College for Women. That's when A&M was all guys, as you know, and so we were willing to try to impress the girls by broadcasting their show. But these are the history cards that the FCC has. Like I say, if you have some interest, sit around and try to Google to find where they are. Take forever to load because the FCC is not going to put a good server in. But there are still things from back then that's still around. This right here is the transmitter that was originally owned by Texas A&M. A&M bought this. It still works today. I did a rebuild job on there. Dusty over here, our chief engineer, just shakes his head that I worked on it. But anyway, it is a wonderful transmitter, and it can be used as a backup anytime you want to because it's fully functional. It has no problems, but it's a tube transmitter. As you can see, those are not water bottles. Those are actually...
They do look like water bottles.
They are rectifier tubes. But the reason I wanted to bring it today is because right about here, there it is. the A&M College inventory control number still on the side.
They're missing it, and they'd like it back.
Yeah. Miss WTAW, that was Nat Razafi in 1959. We found these pictures, okay, and we're talking on the air. Scott's talking in the morning show about, hey, we found these pictures, and there's pictures of her in her bathing suit and sitting in the control room, just cheesy 1950s stuff. We got a call from her. She's still with us, and there she is. She came by to visit. She came to visit one of our hospitality tents, about 4 or 5 years ago, I guess. And so Nat is still around. The other thing, you saw this picture in the slides that we were doing. This is when we first built the WTAW tower. It was built in 1933, and there it is again. That's right. We still use that tower. I've still got the design drawings for a tower that was built in 1933. This is going to come as a shock to you, but it seems to be surrounded by apartments. And so this is a young lady by the name of Hai. I have absolutely no idea why she's there, but if you do a search in the Cushing Library photo section for WTAW, for some reason she and about 40 other pictures of her is in there. I don't know. I have no idea who she is.
A spy.
So, yeah, it's Hai. So there she is. That's us, 100 years old. We all got together, and some of these folks are still here. And we all got together, took our picture. And so that's how I would like to set the scene for what is yet to come. I'm sure Tom is going to surprise us from this point on. You're there, Tom?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah,
Y'all let me in.
Yeah.
I had already retired. but
Actually, you came in through the back door. I didn't know
I
you
did.
were
Yeah.
coming.
Well, I snuck in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Allie said, "Here, go ahead. You can stand in front of me." So yeah, there you go. All right. That was a lot of the history before 50 years ago. What these folks are going to talk about are the things, hopefully, that'll make you nod and say, yeah, I remember that. We're going to kind of jump around historically. We can't cover 102 years in an hour. We'd like to, but we can't. And these subjects that we're going to sort of scattershoot on are subjects that were addressed in a series 2 years ago that WTAW put on the air called, of all things, WTAW 100. And it was a series of 2-minute vignettes, if you will, that ran every day for 6 months, the end of 2022. And Ben thankfully asked me to research and produce that, and that was a real kick.
We ever pay you for that? Did you?
Yeah, you did.
Okay, good. All
yeah,
right,
you did. I sent you invoices, and
okay, good.
And,
Feel
and
better
the checks came and didn't bounce, so that was good.
And it's still available on our website.
Yes, you can hear all 100 and however many days there are in 6 months. That's how many there are. So we are going to sort of skip around. Scott, I want you to talk about how many of the old timers remember an on-air person named Joe Monroe. I see some names going up. Scott, talk about Joe.
So,
and Mary Mike, talk
yeah,
about Joe,
well,
both of you all.
Well,
I'm sorry.
we'll start with me, and then move to her.
Yeah.
Joe came from a background beyond television, from beyond radio, that was amazing to me. He had owned a radio station, in fact, in Louisiana. He had been on a big band with a big band group that toured around the country. I don't know how he exactly ended up in Bryan, Texas, that many years ago. But I learned a whole lot about what to do in radio and what not to do in radio from Joe Monroe. And Joe was a sales manager, I guess. He certainly had come from a completely different background than any other people who were selling radio. But he was going to be on the radio because he had a great voice. And he came on in the mornings with a guy named Bob Bick. And there was just two guys talking on the radio. And one day they looked outside and said, man, it's a lousy day out here. The weather is horrible. But here we are. We're stuck here in the muck and mire. And that became the Muck and Mire Show. And we still played country music, but there was these two guys talking about anything and everything. And one day they're doing a commercial for H&H Equipment and Supply. And they ended the commercial and said, you guys need to go on by there and buy something so Hank can pay his bill for the radio advertising. Well, once again, we struck lightning in a bottle because Hank said, Hank? Ben Acord, maybe. Maybe it's Ben Acord. I'm old, I don't remember. He called and said, I don't know what the hell you said about me today on the radio, but keep doing it. Because any number of people came in and said, man, you should have heard what they said about you on the radio today. And so that really brought a personality to it beyond just a couple of guys sitting around playing music and doing that kind of stuff. I'm going to transition so you can take over. Joe would come times late, some fully functional, if you get my point, when it comes to doing radio.
Hungover.
Yeah, that's the one. And he's talking about such and such. George Carlin that. I said, what? Okay, I'm 25 years old, he's 52. What? He said, George Carlin worked for me. I said, I don't believe that at all. He said, okay, that's fine. You know, he wandered off down the hall. 3-4 months later, the phone rings, I pick it up, WTAW. This is George Carlin, is Joe there? I said, who? And he said George Carlin, and I knew it was a voice. I knew it was him. It was George Carlin. He was calling for Joe Monroe. You ended his career. His career ended with you. It did not end with me. I'll tell one more quick story before I do that. The other two people I work with are in separate studios. We do not see each other. A lot of morning shows, they see each other, they talk, eye-to-eye contact. It's really great. We can't do it because of logistics. But the first time I broadcast when somebody was not with me was when Joe suffered a stroke, and he was in the old Bryan Hospital. And we put a remote transmitter in his room. He would turn that thing on at 5 minutes till 6 every morning. I'd tune it in, and folks, I had to listen to him. I had to catch his voice. I had to catch the way he spoke so that we wouldn't interrupt each other. It's harder than you think. But to be able to, well, you do it now when you talk on the phone to people, you talk all over them all the time because you're trying to listen, they're trying to listen. And I learned how to do that because of Joe Monroe. Joe eventually was able to come back to the studio, but that's how we have been able to work like that. And that was something he taught me in radio that I'll treasure forever.
And your George Carlin
Yeah.
story, but first I want to let you guys know that Joe Monroe gave me my nickname of Mary Mike. Now, he used to call me Mike. My middle name is Michael, so I didn't choose the nickname myself because I was on a microphone, because I was hired for sales. Fortunately, one of the partners left, Joe, and I got to take his place. But I was Mary Mike, and for 48 years, it's been the best sales tool that I've ever had. George Carlin, great story. When Joe passed away, George says, well, I want to come down to the Bryan College Station area and do a scholarship performance. So we called Paulie Mola at the Texas Hall of Fame, and he set up 2 performances. We raised $10,000, and to this day, at Texas A&M, there's a Joe C. Monroe and George Carlin scholarship. And I believe the interest goes to, it used to be a journalism, do we have a journalism department at A&M anymore?
It's back.
It's back, okay. So I think it goes to a journalism. Jay, you would know that, or you could research that for us. But that's the kind of guy George Carlin was. He was a really cool guy. I was actually substituting on the Muck and Myers show with Sam when Joe was in Las Vegas visiting George. And of course, time difference and all, he was his usual joyful liquid self that early in the morning on a vacation. And Joe and George called the radio station and chatted with us there. So I owe Joe many things. He was my mentor in sales. He believed.
Mine too, yeah.
He believed in, present to the client, work with the client, build a relationship. I can't tell you how important that is in our business. We're in a trust business. We are in an investment business. You give us your money, not because you like us. You give us your money because you want a return on your investment. And We have remained a local broadcast facility for, when did we
Ever.
go commercial? Back in the 50s? And
We were, yeah.
we're taking money for ads back in the 50s. So, he's the one that said it all. And he was flamboyant and married 4 or 5 times. I think I had my very first scotch and water with him at the Ptarmigan Club many years ago. But he really opened my eyes when I was a dewy-eyed 22-year-old coming to WTAW.
On the other hand, I didn't like Joe.
You didn't like Joe, yeah. You were competitors when I knew you.
No, I just didn't like him as a human.
Oh, you didn't? Okay, okay. He didn't teach you anything, did he?
I didn't learn a damn thing.
Okay.
Wanted to talk about Joe. I obviously never knew him, but I certainly know of him from the stories of these folks and how he, helped sustain what WTAW is today. Scott and Ben, talk about, and Mary Mike, WTAW was a country station. They played country music. They spun the hits, and they talked in between, and they played commercials. But Scott, you told me a story of what kicked off WTAW transitioning from a music station to what eventually became an all-talk station, and it had to do with a country music song. Have I given you enough?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
So I mentioned.
I was there too. What
No,
are you talking about?
I mentioned Bob Bick, and Bob Bick, after Joe was not on the show anymore, Bob was a regular disc jockey, and it was about 1 in the afternoon, and we were playing a song by Guy Drake called Welfare Cadillac. And it's the story of a guy who is able to drive a Cadillac, yet pick up a welfare check.
And this, ladies and gentlemen, is where the lies begin.
And so he made some sort of a comment about, well, such and such. Well, that fired up the phones. And I don't know if Bob knew how to put a call on the air or not, but the next thing I know is we've got callers wanting to express their opinions about different types of things. Well, I think it was for only 25 minutes as to how Talkback would start at 1 o'clock and it'd finish at 1:25. Bill Watkins was the general manager then, and that was his idea. And he said, but we can take those things and we can let people go ahead and record their thoughts, and then we could play them back during the day or some other time if we wanted to. And I don't remember, was it a Codaphone or whatever in the world kind of machine that people would call?
That was the name of it.
Yeah.
I still don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, yeah. And people would record, and we apparently would play them. You weren't there for that.
I see.
I'm telling you, look, I was the program director at that point. It was from 1 until 1:25, I can tell you that.
It was episode number 24 of WTAW 100. If you
You want to go back and listen, if it'll freshen the memory.
I have to,
You've had to make a lot of bigger decisions than this in your life, so if you don't remember them,
well, see,
that's
I was
okay.
actually just thinking about the day we told everybody we weren't going to play any more country
Well, I
music,
thought that's where we were
and-
going to, but he
And we were going to actually stop playing music, period,
Yeah.
and go with talk, because there was this guy named Rush Limbaugh that seemed to be doing pretty good.
I thought you were going to be more dramatic with it than that. No. We went to a restaurant on University, and we were a sorry AM country radio station. KORA was kicking our rear end. They had beautiful music with no static, and we're playing records and doing all we can to keep this thing going. Ben's in there. He says, okay, he's found something, so he takes us all into the lunchroom of, I don't know what it's called now, but it's over by the Hilton, whatever that place is.
The one in the ditch.
That's the one in the ditch, right. And he said,
I don't know. Oh, that was the time I said, sit down and shut up. Here's what we're doing. No, it's not at all what I did. No, I said, I know some of you are not going to be happy about this, Scott, but what we're getting ready to do is we're going to drop playing country music, and we're going to do a full 24/7 lineup of talk shows and things, and this is going to be the guy that's going to anchor it. And I pushed the button, and there was audio of Rush Limbaugh, and the first time people had heard him, this was in 1990, it was the first time anybody in the room had heard him. And a great deal of support from the staff at that moment, as you can imagine. Yeah. Oh, by the way, and all of you who have been DJs on the radio station, we need to talk after the meeting. So.
And you know, at the only point in time, at that point in time, the only news talk program we had was Larry King late at night. Remember?
Yeah.
Wasn't he our first talker?
It's entirely possible.
And then
yes.
Rush came on, followed by Alan Combs. May he rest in peace. Dr.
Actually,
Laura
actually,
Schlesinger.
That's one of the promos I'm getting ready to do, Dusty. You'll be pleased. Is to kind of go through the list, because we had Neil Bortz, we had G. Gordon Liddy. That was a trip.
Mm-hmm.
We had G. Gordon Liddy. We had
Joy Brown.
Joy Brown,
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Dean Adele, Bruce Williams,
Laura Schlesinger.
Laura Schlesinger, the good
And
Dr.
for those
Laura.
of us who can't sleep, Art Bell.
Yeah, and if you listen to Art, you weren't going to go to sleep, that's for sure. Because you never know exactly who's peering in the window at that time. Yeah, but it, as you can tell by the fact that we're still doing talk, it was a good call. We, the names of the shows have changed, of course, because the time takes its toll on us all. And it's still there. There's really the morning show on WTAW is sometimes the highest rated radio show, not just talk show, but highest rated show in the entire community and in the ratings for the entire city. And it has certainly been a good decision. It's been a good decision. It was a good decision.
most
Good decision.
Profitable decision
It was
ever made
profitable,
was
yes.
to turn to news talk.
Yeah.
And we never looked back, thank
No,
goodness.
it did work.
WTAW was, like we said, originally owned by Texas A&M. They broadcasted at several different locations on the A&M campus, the YMCA building, the administration building. And then Texas A&M decided they wanted to get out of the radio business. They didn't want to do that anymore.
They were afraid of taxes.
Right.
Not Texas, taxes.
Yeah.
They were not clear exactly how that as an educational institution they were going to be taxed on having a radio station. That ought to make you feel good, Jay. But anyway, they weren't. Jay's running KAMU these days. And that's why they said, well, let's sell it for $38,000. That was also a good deal.
That was. But it was sold, and I believe it was to some conglomerate in Waco, I
Waco,
believe, something
yeah.
like that. And then John Hicks and Bill Watkins, I think they, if I'm remembering the series right, they were looking to buy a radio station in Waco, and they pretty much had a deal done, and then it fell through, and they were on their way back to Houston. And they decided to stop in College Station, and they ran into some green shack. Do you know enough about this story, Ben, to
Well, actually,
talk about the? Do you have a picture of the green shack?
I don't.
But anyway, it was where this radio station was broadcasting out of, and it was locked, and so they had to, look through the windows to see what was inside this green shack, and they ended up buying it. And that's how the Hicks family became involved with WTAW. And that's where I'm leading to, is the history of the Hicks family, John Hicks, and all three of you can talk to this and the impact that the Hicks family has had on where we were then and where we are now.
He tried to fire me. 3 months into my job. 3 months. Seriously? 3 months. My two accounts were Payless Shoe Stores and Wicks Lumber. 3 months is not any time to
Put
build
them out
an
of
account.
business, didn't you?
Did a lot of business. No, that's what I inherited. But
No,
you
I
know.
was just saying you put them out of business.
Oh, I
didn't
put
you?
them out of. I did. Thank you
Payless.
very much. That's not a joking thing in this day and age. We don't joke about that. But I wasn't progressing like John Hicks wanted me to, and he told Joe. He said, "Let's cut her loose." Joe tried to fire me. I didn't take no for an answer. I mean, I just didn't. I said, "There's no way." And thank goodness that Joe, I don't know whether he was just feeling sorry for me that day or had had one too many scotches, but the next month, My billing crept up. Next month after that, more sales, more sales, more sales. And the rest is history. Then I was always in the marketing side, but then I got an opportunity to be on the radio, on the Muck and Myers show. And that gave me another catalyst under Papa Hicks, but that's what we called him.
Right.
Because
Well,
when he would call,
There was the people in Waco, and then the Hicks family, which is actually how the FCC card, which I was looking for, referred to it. And then the Hicks family sold it off to Roger B. Watkins, who then rolled it into a corporate entity called Brazos Radio, who then rolled it back in to Roger B. Watkins and I think R. Stephen Hicks at the time. And after, I don't know, during the 90s when the big consolidation of broadcasting came about, the late 90s, I didn't move. I was still in the same chair I was in, and we went through like 7 owners. And nothing ever changed, best I could tell, but we were owned by various groups. We were bought out by AM FM Radio Inc. We were bought out by Sonance Communications. That's where we ended up. At that point, we were bought out by, iHeartMedia, at the time Clear Channel. SFX Broadcasting owned us for a while. What was the other?
Capstar?
Capstar, oh, yeah, Gulfstar, Capstar.
All the stars.
Those were heady times, friends, when there were just a lot of changes going on. And then Bill Hicks, at one point we were getting ready to be rolled into another corporate entity. And Bill said, are you tired of this? And I said, yes, I am. And we decided to pull these stations out of the group that was going to buy us and keep the Bryan College station market where it is. And so we became at that time a locally owned radio station or locally owned radio group, and we still are. We're the only locally owned media in Bryan College Station, where the people who own the station sleep in the same town where they own the media. And that's unusual in this day and time.
And that's broadcast, publications, and digital. So that's what media equals.
Mm-hmm.
Scott, you've been working for the Hicks family since 56 years ago. Talk about the impact that's had on you.
Well, of course, Papa John would come into town, and he was imposing because he was the owner. We knew when it was we knew the difference between when he was just casually visiting and when he had come to see the banker, and that would be when he brought his teeth. Seriously, if he brought his teeth, he was going to see the banker. But he was a great guy, and I worked for him here, and he was still actually on the premises when I went to Beaumont. I worked for Steve Hicks, his son, in Beaumont. Bill was down there. I never met Bill, the best I can tell, for the 4 years I was down there. They're locally owned, and they believe in the community. The second generation looks at facilities different than Papa John did. We were in a trailer park before. We were in Mobile Town, which had stories in and of itself that you could look through the disc jockey window. But the Hickses wanted to have the best physical plants possible, the best equipment possible, and the best people. And it felt so good to walk into the building that overlooked what used to be Safeway, where the Bryan Eagle is, the Galleria building, because that's where Bill Hicks wanted us to be. He wanted us to be top story, looking better than anybody else, and we've continued that now. I don't know, how long have we been at Crystal Park, at Guarantee Bank?
94?
It's still the Crystal Park Plaza.
Okay, fine.
It's
All right.
still the name on the tombstone out front. But when
We were at Galleria when I came there in 93, and I was only there for about a year. So in 94, so we've been there for 30 years, where we are now.
And Dusty, are you okay with that, with us not moving all 11 or 12 radio stations?
Yeah. Dusty, Chris?
Y'all.
Y'all.
But I'll tell you this, when I came back, what I wanted to do is I wanted to start my own business when I was in Beaumont. I wanted to start my own business. I wanted to move back to Bryan College Station because I thought I had a pretty good idea. But, starting your own business is difficult. You got to have some startup capital, and you got to be able to take care of your family. And I went in and I talked to Bill Hicks, and they hired me and said, why don't you come in and do this and go do some sales? And then I decided to transition completely into broadcast when my business took off. But they took care of me. They made sure that I was a stable person. I could stably start my business and pay for my health insurance and my startup costs, and I'll always be thankful to them. And again, I've worked for them for 51 years, and they are a tremendous family. They treat today's employees the same way they treated me. They're great to work for, there's no doubt.
And I'll say that when Ben says locally owned, you hear that phrase all the time. But in this instance, it really means something because to be able, the reason that I told you that so many employees, they don't leave, is because of that. If you have a problem, if you want to know where you stand, in so many businesses, the answer is some carpeted office on the 20th floor in San Antonio or in Dallas or in Austin, somewhere else. That's where the answer is. We got to run it through corporate, right? At WTAW, it's about a 25-pace step down the hallway where you can get your answer.
It's good to let me know you're coming so I can wake up.
Yeah, that's right. And that's the reason that nobody leaves WTAW. I think that would be the main reason, because you know where you stand at all times. So I just wanted to throw
25 paces is the reason why?
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Rather than several phone calls and we'll get back to you.
Of course,
right?
absolutely.
As Tom's studio was closer than normal.
That's true. Talk about, if you will, let's talk about sports. And when we went to All Talk, and I guess that came around, that's when our sports presence became so defined. Obviously, our sports presence started in 1919 when we broadcasted the first ever football game in 1919. But it really became a thing when we became a talk station. And Ben, talk about the reason why. I know Bill has said, hey, you know, we're at a major university, and I'm no dummy, and I know what to put on the air and what people listen to. But talk about how our sports presence has evolved as not only the A&M flagship, but putting 7 high school football games on the air every Friday night at the same time. Just talk about that whole element of what we do.
It was a difficult decision to just jump into it, because I know this is going to come as a shock to those of you who have lived here in College Station for a while. Texas A&M did not give us the rights to broadcast those games for free. Okay, I'm sure some of you probably have had some dealings with A&M, but we kind of rolled the dice a little bit. We decided when they came up for a bid, we did the bidding, and there were several things that A&M wanted more than anything else, was to make a contribution to the athletic department, like your rights fees. But they also wanted us to do more than football. Whoever was going to bid on the rights to Texas A&M athletics was going to, by gosh, be bidding on Texas A&M athletics. And so on our other stations, you'll hear us from time to time with soccer. We have baseball. We have all the baseball games. We have all the men's and women's basketball games, and we do.
Do we do softball?
Yeah.
Online.
Yeah.
Do we do softball? Yolanda, let me ask you: are we doing softball? I see.
That's what I
Okay.
thought.
Do we do them all? How many we do?
I know.
We do all of them? Which station do we put that on? Gospel?
You know-
Okay, 97.7 is the,
know those talent
97.3, sorry. Yeah.
You know those talent fee checks you sign all the time?
Yeah, there's just so many of them, it's hard to keep up. But anyway, so that was the commitment that we made, is that we would put these sports, I guess, some of them, we call them the Olympic sports, but and then there are some of the D1 sports still in the baseball world and basketball. Isn't it kind of exciting how that's turned around from being just an also-ran to being a real thing? And that was what carried the day. Now, you know, if we had said we're going to broadcast them all and we're going to pay you $5 and that's it, I don't think we would have. I think they would have made an exception about what their needs were. But being able to have enough radio stations to put everything on that they wanted was key to it.
And I think WTAW being the flagship, and Aggie Athletics coming back home to the radio station that started it all, was big to A&M. It was huge for us. And
That's why I have the promo that says we broadcast the first one and we'll broadcast the next one, because we did.
Yeah,
we broadcast
we
the
did.
first one in 1919.
I remember Bill told me when I was talking to him for the series, he said that one of the reasons that A&M was so receptive to our bid for being the flagship actually started with the women's basketball. Lynn Hickey, who had been hired as the women's basketball coach at Texas A&M, wanted her games on the radio. And WTAW, or Bill Hicks and Ben said, yes, okay, we will do that. Don't know who's going to listen back then, because women's athletics had just become under the NCAA umbrella not that long before. But said we'll do it, and I think that impressed A&M enough. Hey, they'll carry our women's basketball games. That went a lot towards us maybe getting our foot in the door as far as becoming and still being the flagship station.
And the 7 high school football games every weekend is a challenge, but
Wow.
you know, Chris over here, chief engineer that I keep pointing at and giggling, it happens. We finally bought enough stuff so that we don't have to share, and we have what, box 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it has wheels on it. So you know we do the four big schools, and where else do we go here?
Navasota, Buffalo.
Navasota, Buffalo, and St. Joseph's.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Seven.
And St. Joseph's, I should point out, is broadcast on a station that's not even ours.
Right.
It's
Red
it's
Sea
broadcast-
Radio,
Red
yeah.
Sea Radio, which is owned by the Catholic Diocese. But we put the pieces together and pay the announcers and sell some ads on it, and so that's
Yeah, that high school. I mean, broadcasting A&M football games and basketball and baseball games is easy compared to the high school football season. I mean, I guarantee you, because with A&M, that comes from the network, so you just need a board op that pushes the right buttons and plays the local commercials. But for high school football, like Ben was saying, there are 7 different boxes of equipment. There's 7 different board ops that you need. College kids or high school kids that don't that'll break their date on Friday night and come in and work until midnight. So a lot of pieces have to work together to put those high school football games on the air. That's really a tough thing.
No, I'm just sitting here thinking about how tough that actually is, because we also have to come up with 14 play-by-play and color people. That's easy. Yeah.
We're getting to a quarter tail, and I want to make time for questions. So be thinking of your questions. But I want to spend the next time until then talking about the things that we do besides the regular programming, the regular day-to-day programming, the Infomaniacs, the satellite shows.
We have talked a lot about programming, haven't
Right.
we? And the community service thing is really
That's what we're
we mostly
that's
do.
where I'm going.
And
right
that's
now.
where we get our awards from, huh?
Exactly.
Well, we
That's
don't do
where
it
I'm
for that
going.
reason, but
Is the community service, and not only community service, but community service when you don't expect it, and that's what I want to talk about. And we're going to talk about two specific events: Bonfire, Collapse, and Hurricane Ike. Those two, because those are the two that stick in my mind as far as where we performed for the betterment of the community, and we helped the community in making their decisions, and the news that came out of Bonfire and the preparation required that came out of Ike. So let's talk about Bonfire first. And I'm going to...
just
Jay,
as soon not do that.
Jay, come
man.
on up here and stand next to me, if you will.
But
It's something that we need to talk about, because there was a lot of people that were involved with that media-wise. But I'll
Scott
just-
called me on the phone at 4 that morning, and he said, we just had the bonfire fall. This is really bad. You need to get up and get ready to go out and help us cover this. And I said, where do you want me to go? And he said, well, we don't have anybody at the hospital right now. So I went to the hospital. I was threatened with being arrested twice and escorted off the premises twice. And, that still traumatic. Listening to the 911 calls.
Jay was the news director, and when I showed up that morning, I didn't know anything about it. When I drove to work, I heard some ambulances, but I didn't really think about any of it when I was driving to work at 5 in the morning. But I was met in the hallway by Jay, and Jay, I never forget what he said. He said, Tom, you're not a sports guy today, you're a news guy. And talk about your memory of that morning.
Back then, you had to do something called beat checks. That's really before the internet was around and social media and all that. So early every morning, the first thing I would do is start calling police departments and the DPS and just find out what happened overnight, because a lot of times those were my stories for the morning show. And immediately I started to understand what was going on. In fact, the first thing that happened was the phone in the newsroom was ringing. It never rang at that time in the morning. And I answered it, and a woman said, can you tell me what's going on? My husband is an emergency room doctor. He got called in for something big. And that's how I knew that something was going on. And eventually found out, had to activate. We didn't have a full newsroom full of reporters. So my reporters that day had to be Tom, and it ended up being Scott. It ended up being Ben. And so we utilized the resources we had, and we did a lot of coverage. And in fact, Tom and Scott were getting information out there at the bonfire site before anybody else was. Unconfirmed information. We knew what those numbers were becoming before they were being officially reported.
We were lucky that it all turned out to be accurate as well. We didn't have to backtrack and say, oh, we gave you bad information on that. So I guess we learned who to ask for. But that's still a tough subject.
I was getting information from a justice of the peace who was actually in the stack. And yeah, there was a level of trust I had to have for him, and I did. And that's when I reported things that A&M was not releasing yet. For example, that there were 2 females involved. A&M was not confirming that or releasing it, and that was information that we had. But Scott, you later came out to the stack, but at first you were in the studio taking calls from Jay, from Ben and me.
I was a conduit. These are the guys who did the work. They did the work. I cannot imagine, if this happened today, the amount of bad information that would have to be cleared up by anybody who had a phone. The fact that there's journalistic background in the 4 of us and the trust from the people who we talked to in us that allowed us to cover a story when College Station, Texas was the center of the news universe. And I'm glad I worked with people like these guys who did it right, listeners who trusted us, sources who trusted us, made our job, even though as difficult as the circumstance was, we did it responsibly and we did it in a great way.
So we'll move on from that, because it's a tough thing, as you see, it's a tough thing to still talk about, but I just wanted to emphasize the fact that yes, indeed, we are a news station, and we certainly showed our stripes that day. Let's move on to Hurricane Ike. Folks obviously here remember Hurricane Ike and how it affected not only Galveston, Houston, but all the way inland to us, to Navasota, to I guess we were sort of on the outskirts of the real physical effect of it, but we are a regional radio station. And Ben, I know you were very involved with the emergency center downtown, and sort of talk about how we performed as a community service during that.
Well, we did spend the night, and we got the T-shirt to prove it, but we did spend the night at the radio station when Ike was coming through. And we were all, for our cat naps and things, we had inflatable mattresses, and we went to different offices. I got to go and sleep in Mrs. Hatcher's office on the floor in there, at which time I discovered she has a motion-sensitive light switch in there. So every time I would roll over, the light would come on, and give it 5 minutes, it'll go off again. Just don't move, Ben. It was another sore spot. The biggest sore spot that we had was not Ike, but it was the evacuation. When we had to evacuate the city of Bryan, we got a call that said, evacuate the city of Bryan. Oh, okay. Why? Well, there's a fire out here at the fertilizer plant, and it's giving off a noxious gas. Well, what kind of gas is it? Well, we can't tell you. Why not? Well, we're waiting for the EPA to come here and tell us. Oh, so do you want me to tell everybody to run for their life to evacuate? Or do you want us to tell them to just put some paper towels under the door? What? Is this one breath and we're dealing with Bhopal, India again? What? They wouldn't tell us. They would not tell us. We actually had an emergency manager at the time who, when we were going to go and ask, we were asking too many questions, including where's the evacuation area now? Where do you want everybody to go to? They threatened to arrest our news people. KBTX and one of our news people were going to arrest us for releasing that information. It's what we do. We told everybody, we want you to evacuate the city. Well, do you run red lights? Do you just poke on out? What do you want to do about Fluffy the cat? What about Grandma? Do we, try to get her? Do we try to get her wheelchair in the back of the car? When
Take
you say
Fluffy, leave
when
Grandma.
you say evacuate, what do you want us to do? Well, it was their emergency, and we had no business asking these questions. Now, Mike Wright and I caused as much stink about that as we could. We testified before both houses in Austin about that and all. But that one is still a PTSD moment for me. I'll just tell you, because there is no reason that a general manager in College Station, Texas, should be the one looking up the material safety data sheet for what happens when ammonia burns. I mean, when fertilizer burns. As it turns out, it releases ammonia, so you'll just get red eyes. But we didn't know that. I didn't know what it was. But apparently it was my job to find that out. Still irritated, can you tell?
I'm the guy in charge of the clock here, looking at the clock here. But I want, before we go to Q&A, I want to talk about WTAW and Bryan Broadcasting as a community partner, and what they do every day besides switch on the switch and talk on the radio out there in the community. Mary Mike, you start.
Okay, thanks. We have been awarded a Service to America award, but I'd like to talk about our Service to Bryan College Station recognition, because you sitting here today listening to this laundry list of things that we have accomplished, we couldn't do it without the people in this room. We couldn't do it without our residents and our friends and family and customers. And even when they ask us to do something we think is kind of ridiculous, perhaps like spend a week on top of the 7-Eleven store for muscular dystrophy.
Kiss a pig.
Kiss a pig, mud wrestle.
You've had an exciting life
I
in this
have,
biz. Yes.
I have, but even to this day, the Angel Tree with the Salvation Army, what a great project that we have. How many times have we emceed and sponsored tables because we wanted to help the community and their events. Your events are our events. They're very special to us. Public service announcements, that's what we do. If you have an organization that's having a rally or a pie bake sale, I don't know, we have community calendars on all of our radio stations and all of our websites. We want to help get the message out, and that's what we do.
Responses to natural disasters like Ike and Harvey and things like that, loading up trucks and taking them where they're needed.
We sent when Harvey, we heard, the flooding at Harvey was what the big problem was, and everybody, the people had been evacuated. The people who were being flooded out were evacuated to the George R. whatever center. What is it?
Brown.
George R. Brown, thank you. I'm told by my older friends this is not getting any better.
It won't.
The George R. Brown Convention Center, everybody was evacuated there, and they, they were kind of ready for that sort of thing, but they weren't really ready. They were out of diapers. They had food and some water, but so we know that people up here want something. They want to help. And so we act as a focal point for that help. Within the first 6 hours, we had a truck, one of the giant U-Hauls, going down the road, going to the George R. Brown Convention Center. The sheriff in Harris County met us at the city limits and drove us to the convention center so we could unload bottled water and dog food and diapers and all. And the same thing with the next 3 trucks that we filled up over the course of another day. And, we get credit for it, but very few of those rolls of toilet paper were ours, It was really the people in Bryan College Station who brought that by, who trusted us to drive up and give us $100 bill out of their window of their car and know that we were actually going to go buy whatever they needed. It's important to me that when we don't break our arms patting ourselves on the back, because I think of us really is more just a conduit for the response that the people in this community want to make. And so there's that.
All right, so I'm going to stop you now. We've done a lot of great things, but we're not the only radio station in this town that's done great things. KORA has done MASH, Make a Smile Happen, forever.
What a great idea. Who came up with that?
I just want you to know, this is the guy who came up with that one. So he brought his culture with him, and we are the better people for it.
Before we go to Q&A, Scott DeLucia is, for my money, the most knowledgeable, in-tune person as far as local happenings, local politics, local concerns. And he takes, sorry, Mark, and he takes that knowledge and is a, without comparison, a great interviewer. Now that I've lathered you up real good, Scott, talk a little bit about that element of what you do, hosting the community forums, which I think one's going to be coming up here pretty soon. Is that right?
Monday and Tuesday.
Yeah, talk about that.
All right, well, yeah, there's a couple of things had to do with that. And one of the people that made it really, really important is sitting right here. His name is Jay Sokol. Jay Sokol left to become the public information officer for the city of Bryan. And he realized there was no really good, strong relationship between our radio station and the city of Bryan. What happens if something bad happens? This is their first time on our doorstep saying, will you help us? When we haven't been able to build any rapport with these people. He was the one who got it started in the city of Bryan. We translated that very easily to the city of College Station, so that now on alternate Wednesdays, we have the mayors on. On Thursday, the city of Bryan comes on to talk about what they do. Friday, College Station does. We've gotten to the point where they alternate city council members, so we'll hear city council members from those cities on a continuing basis. The interview thing also, I have to give my wife credit. She listens to another radio station in Dallas years ago. She's listening to the mayor of Dallas, and she says, why can't you have the mayor on a regular basis? Why can't you have elected officials on a basis? The second person besides Jay Sokol I will compliment, in addition to my wife, was a guy named Chet Edwards. Chet Edwards, a Democrat, he was our congressman. He was in trouble. He needed to win this district if he was going to win the race. And so he made himself available to us every week. Every week, we would talk to Chet Edwards. We missed a couple of weeks, but not too often. He understood the importance. He would come to our studio when he could, because he knew that he needed to have some sort of a platform to at least get his voice, get his name out there.
I need to stress we did not talk politics. It was the rule.
Yes, that's true. Exactly. We were talking about legislation. We were talking about the government, the way things were. It wasn't R versus D, kind of the way we are now. Obviously, Bill Flores ended up defeating him, and he continued that. Pete Sessions did as well. Michael McCall is our congressman right now. It's very difficult to get him on the radio, simply because we are a very small part of his district, to be completely honest with you. He likes Bryan College Station just fine. He had kids who went to A&M, but he's also the chairman of a very important committee in the House, and he's in a leadership role there. So it's difficult for him to clear his calendar. I'm sorry that that's the way it happens. I'm explaining that to you so you know, but the idea is these politicians, these elected officials, understand they can come onto our radio station and not do a 30-second soundbite that's going to be edited by somebody who doesn't understand the story. As Ben will say, we give them the time unedited for better or worse, because we've had some misspeak before, and that's fine too. But we give them a platform, and once again, it's all about trust. We're just trying to make sure they can have a good, clear communication with us. We can trust them, and they can trust us.
All right. And that's the reason why, and I know Elizabeth and Linda will both tell you that during city council meetings and in Bryan, you'll hear so many visitors get in front of the mic and say, well, I heard on WTAW, or WTAW said, or just, that's one of the reasons, is because of the community involvement. Okay. It's 1 o'clock, but we're going to go a little farther. If you need to leave, I understand that you need to leave. Sorry, Mark, you'll have to edit this for the station. Any questions, please raise your hand.